Emily Carter vanished on a quiet autumn night, leaving behind only her abandoned car and a trail of questions. Daniel Hayes, a man the town barely noticed, would soon become the center of a dark secret no one in Riverside could have imagined. What happened to Emily, and how far did Daniel's hidden darkness reach? Tonight, we uncover the chilling truth in Midnight Confession, secrets buried in the dark. Riverside had always been the kind of town where life moved slowly, and everyone knew everyone else. It was a place where neighbors waved from their front porches, children played freely in the streets until sunset, and the biggest concern most people faced was the annual Harvest Festival or the occasional power outage. Crime was almost unheard of. People left their doors unlocked at night, trusting that nothing dangerous would ever disturb the quiet rhythm of their lives. For decades, Riverside had worn the appearance of safety like a comforting coat, giving its residents a sense of security they rarely questioned. But all of that changed one chilly autumn evening when Emily Carter vanished. Emily was 28, a dedicated nurse who had recently started working at Riverside General Hospital. She was known for her gentle nature and unwavering commitment to helping others, and she had been popular among her colleagues and neighbors alike. On that particular night, she had finished a long shift, her uniform still carrying the faint smell of antiseptic and hospital corridors. She had left the hospital just before midnight, expecting only a short drive to her apartment on the edge of town. Her car was spotted near the gas station at the outskirts of Riverside, its headlights off, keys still in the ignition. The vehicle seemed to have been abandoned in a hurry. On the driver's seat there was a streak of mud, as if someone had entered the car after walking through the wet earth surrounding the station. The discovery was the first sign that something was seriously wrong. When Emily failed to return home, friends and family became alarmed. They called her workplace, retraced the route she usually took, and eventually alerted the authorities. Police quickly launched a search, combing the streets and nearby woods, but the town's familiar calm made the search feel almost surreal. The residents, who were used to the slow, predictable pace of life, suddenly found themselves confronted with fear and uncertainty. Rumors began circulating almost immediately. Some whispered that she had run off voluntarily, though no one believed it. Others suggested a stranger might have been in town, but Riverside had been so quiet for so long that the idea of a dangerous outsider seemed impossible. Despite the initial confusion, the evidence near the gas station made one thing terrifyingly clear. Emily had not simply vanished. Someone had been with her after she left the hospital. The mud, the abandoned keys, and the traces of movement around the car suggested a struggle had taken place, though there was no clear sign of what had happened or where she might have gone. The incident shattered Riverside's sense of safety. For the first time in decades, residents locked their doors, kept their children inside after dark, and looked over their shoulders when walking alone. A feeling of unease settled over the town, thick and unyielding, like the early morning fog that rolled in from the river. No one could have predicted what would come next. The quiet streets of Riverside, once symbols of trust and simplicity, had become the backdrop for a mystery that would consume the town and reveal dark secrets that had long been buried. What began as a simple disappearance was about to unfold into something far more sinister, a story of fear, obsession, and the hidden darkness that could exist even in the most familiar places. Riverside would never look the same again. The search for Emily quickly extended beyond the streets of Riverside into the surrounding woods, where shadows stretched long beneath the faint glow of flashlights. Investigators moved methodically, stepping over roots and underbrush, their breaths visible in the cold night air. It wasn't long before they discovered the first clue, a trail of footprints in the damp earth. The prints were uneven, some deep as if carrying weight, and led away from the gas station toward an old, abandoned farmhouse on the edge of the forest. The building was a relic from another era, with peeling paint, broken windows, and a sagging roof that seemed to groan with every gust of wind. Inside, the farmhouse smelled of damp wood and decay. Police found scraps of clothing that matched what Emily had been wearing that night, tossed carelessly across the floorboards. There was no sign of her, no note, nothing that explained what had happened. The sight of her belongings alone sent chills down the spines of those who entered. The farmhouse was eerily silent, except for the faint creaking of the old structure, and it seemed almost impossible that something so sinister could exist within the boundaries of a town that had always felt so safe. As investigators searched further, a chilling detail emerged. Records revealed that the same farmhouse had been connected to another missing person case 10 years earlier. A young woman named Sarah Thompson had vanished without a trace, and the case had gone cold after months of fruitless searching. The revelation caused whispers to spread through the police department and eventually through the town itself. Riverside residents began to question what they thought they knew about their quiet streets and friendly neighbors. Was it possible that someone had been hiding dark secrets all along, right in plain sight? Forensic teams combed the area with meticulous care. Every corner of the farmhouse was examined, every floorboard lifted, every closet inspected. In a dusty attic, they found a few items carefully tucked away, a locket, a faded scarf, and a small journal, all belonging to past victims. It was a discovery that confirmed their worst fears. Emily A.'s disappearance was not an isolated incident. Someone had been operating undetected, using the farmhouse as a place to hide evidence and keep the secrets of their crimes buried. The psychological weight of the investigation began to affect the town. Residents stopped taking evening walks, streetlights seemed dimmer, and an undercurrent of suspicion ran through everyday life. Parents kept children close, neighbors peeked anxiously through curtains, and no one felt truly safe. The knowledge that a connection existed between Emily's case and a decade-old mystery left everyone unsettled. It was no longer simply about finding her. It was about uncovering the truth behind a series of events that had long been ignored, hidden beneath layers of normalcy. The farmhouse itself became a symbol of dread, its windows like empty eyes watching the town. What had started as a single disappearance now threatened to expose a history of darkness that Riverside had never been prepared to face. The footprints, the abandoned belongings, and the remnants of past victims were all silent witnesses, guiding investigators deeper into a story that was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Each new clue revealed more about the person responsible and the calculated nature of their crimes, setting the stage for the shocking revelations that were still to come. As the investigation deepened, one name began to surface repeatedly in the whispers of Riverside: Daniel Hayes. He was a quiet man, living alone in a small house on the outskirts of town, where the forest began to thicken and shadows stretched long across the land. Daniel was a mechanic by trade, known to some for his skill with cars and machinery, but largely unnoticed by the town as a whole. He had a history that raised eyebrows. Years earlier, he had been questioned in connection with the disappearance of Sarah Thompson, the young woman who had vanished a decade ago. At the time, there had been no evidence strong enough to charge him, and the case went cold. Now, with Emily's disappearance, his name resurfaced like a shadow cast across Riverside. Neighbors began to recall odd details from the past, seemingly insignificant at the time but now disturbing in hindsight. Late-night noises coming from Daniel's garage, strange lights flickering in the woods behind his house, and an occasional smell of chemicals that no one could identify. These small anomalies, once dismissed as quirks of an eccentric man, now took on a sinister quality. Authorities decided to investigate further, obtaining search warrants for both his home and property. The house itself appeared ordinary at first glance, but behind the facade of normalcy, investigators found signs of meticulous secrecy. A hidden storage shed at the back of the property drew their attention, its door cleverly concealed behind overgrown shrubbery. Inside, the room was unnervingly organized, almost clinical in its arrangement. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes and containers, and each item seemed deliberately placed, cataloged, and hidden from the world. Among the contents, police discovered a chilling collection of women's belongings: scarves, pieces of jewelry, torn clothing, and a nurse's badge with Emily's name still faintly visible. The discovery confirmed their growing suspicion. Emily had been brought here, and this shed had been a repository of past crimes. The implications were horrifying. Not only was she one of Daniel's victims, but the shed suggested a pattern, a long history of premeditation and careful concealment. For the investigators, every item told a story, a silent testament to the lives that had been stolen and the meticulous planning behind each act. As the hours turned into days, the town of Riverside braced itself for what was coming. The knowledge that someone had been living among them, harboring such darkness, left an indelible mark on the community. Streets that once seemed welcoming now felt threatening, and every shadow sparked fear. The shed, with its hidden compartments and the unmistakable evidence of crime, became a symbol of the unseen horrors lurking beneath ordinary lives. Authorities now faced a critical moment in the investigation. They had found the physical evidence connecting Daniel Hayes to Emily's disappearance, but the full extent of his crimes remained unknown. Each item, each scrap of clothing, hinted at a history of violence carefully concealed over years. The realization that this one man could have eluded justice for so long sent waves of disbelief and terror through the town. Riverside's quiet streets, once thought to be safe, were now irrevocably tainted by the dark secrets that had been meticulously buried in the shadows, waiting to be unearthed. Daniel Hayes remained silent for days after his arrest. In interviews, he offered nothing, staring blankly at the walls of the interrogation room as though the questions did not exist. Investigators grew frustrated and anxious. Every hour of silence stretched the town's fear further. Riverside had waited for answers for too long, and the air was thick with anticipation. Then, on the third night, in the dead of midnight, everything changed. Daniel's calm, measured voice broke the silence in a way that no one in the room could have predicted. He began to speak, not with remorse, but with an unsettling precision, as though recounting a routine he had rehearsed in his mind for years. He admitted to taking Emily from the gas station, describing the calculated steps he had taken to ensure that no one would follow. He spoke of how he had driven her to the farmhouse, his words methodical, almost clinical, stripping the act of any human warmth. He revealed the location where he had buried her in the surrounding woods, describing the contours of the ground and the hidden depressions he had chosen carefully. The investigators listened, frozen, as the details aligned perfectly with the evidence already found at the abandoned farmhouse and the footprints in the mud. But what made the confession even more horrifying was what came next. Daniel Hayes revealed that Emily was not his first victim. The farmhouse, the shed, and the hidden compartments had all been part of a long, meticulously planned system. He admitted to using the same methods over years, luring women from different parts of Riverside and even beyond. The evidence of their presence, clothing, personal items, and other artifacts was not just proof of his crimes. It was a manifestation of the control he had exercised over their lives even after they were gone. Investigators realized that what they had stumbled upon was not the act of a single night, but the pattern of a predator who had operated in silence for years. The confession shook Riverside to its core. The quiet town, which had prided itself on safety and community, was now confronted with the horrifying realization that darkness had lived alongside them for decades. The authorities began to map out the timeline of Daniel's crimes, linking each disappearance to a moment in history that had been dismissed or forgotten. The townspeople, who had once trusted their neighbors without question, began to question everything. The people they had waved to from their porches, the empty streets at night, even their own memories. By the time Daniel finished, investigators had a clear understanding of the depth of his crimes, but there was still a sense of incompleteness. Each revelation seemed to peel back another layer of the story, revealing more secrets than they could have anticipated. The midnight confession had not only provided crucial evidence for the case, it had also forced the town to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil can hide in the most ordinary of places. Riverside would never again be able to walk its streets without the weight of suspicion and fear, because the story of Daniel Hayes had exposed the fragility of safety and the haunting reality of secrets buried in the dark. Guided by Daniel Hayes's confession, law enforcement returned to the woods surrounding Riverside with a grim determination. The search, once cautious and uncertain, became precise and methodical. Investigators followed his directions, stepping carefully over tangled roots and uneven ground, their flashlights cutting through the dense darkness of the forest. The stillness of the night was broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional snap of a branch. Every step carried the weight of anticipation and dread as the team realized they were on the verge of uncovering horrors that had been hidden for years. It was not long before the first burial site emerged, partially concealed beneath a thick layer of fallen leaves. The soil had been disturbed recently enough that it left subtle markings, patterns only an experienced investigator could recognize. As the ground was carefully excavated, the remains of Emily Carter were discovered, bringing with them a mix of relief and sorrow. Her family, who had endured the uncertainty of her disappearance for weeks, were finally able to claim closure, though the emotional toll of what had been revealed was profound. The town collectively held its breath as more burial sites were uncovered, each one a stark reminder of the extent of Daniel Hayes's crimes. The recovery process revealed a chilling pattern. The victims had been methodically buried, some beneath shallow soil, others hidden under thick foliage, each site carefully chosen to avoid detection. Among the remains were personal belongings, items that had been stolen from the women as tokens of control and possession. Each discovery deepened the understanding of the calculated cruelty with which Daniel had operated. Investigators realized that the farmhouse and surrounding woods had been central to his activities for over a decade, a private world in which he maintained absolute authority over the lives and deaths of his victims. Riverside, a town once defined by calm streets and neighborly trust, was forced to reckon with a grim reality. The news of the discoveries spread quickly, shattering the illusion of safety and sparking conversations that had long been avoided. Residents who had once walked freely in the quiet streets now did so with caution, haunted by the knowledge that darkness had existed right alongside them. Parents kept their children close, neighbors eyed one another warily, and the collective sense of innocence that had characterized the town was forever lost. Daniel Hayes was swiftly tried and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, the evidence recovered from the farmhouse, the shed, and the burial sites formed an irrefutable narrative of his crimes. Yet even as justice was served, the impact on Riverside was undeniable. The case left scars that no trial or sentence could heal. The streets, the woods, and the abandoned farmhouse all became symbols of fear and memory, places that reminded the town of the hidden horrors that could exist even in the most ordinary surroundings. In the end, midnight confession. Secrets, buried in the dark, became more than the story of Emily Carter or Daniel Hayes. It became a tale of a community confronted with the fragility of trust, the hidden capacity for evil, and the lasting consequences of secrets that linger in the shadows. Riverside would never again be the quiet town it once appeared to be. Beneath the familiar streets and the seemingly ordinary lives, the memory of those buried in the dark served as a haunting reminder that evil can exist where it is least expected, and that some secrets refuse to stay hidden forever.